obviously you were director at GCHQ for several years, and some people have said that you initiated the greatest internal change for the better at GCHQ since the end of the Cold War. Given that this is a time for many people, many companies to change, whether they want to or not, how should they embrace this opportunity to change, to take it as that, an opportunity rather than a threat?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that it sometimes sounds cynical to say you don't waste the crisis, but actually it is about seeing this as an opportunity. And I think the best organizations do two things quite separately. So they manage the crisis now, but they have a separate group of people, separate person, or a separate part of their brain if they're a one-man leader and CEO, thinking about the future. And you need to separate those out, because the people who are immersed in the crisis now just can't do that. But you don't want to get to the end of the crisis and think, what do we do now? So some capacity and effort dedicated now to planning for the future is really essential. And I think that's the key. It's what the military are good at, it's what the intelligence community do in a crisis. So we do actually throw everything at the crisis, but we usually have a separate group of people thinking about, so what are the implications and where does this go next? And where are we going to be in a year, 2 years, 5 years time? And that's, I think, the only way you can really do strategic in a crisis.
Given the world is in the grip of the pandemic, that is pretty much everything we are all talking about, understandably, right now. But there are many things that are going on unreported, under the radar. For example, money scams targeting the vulnerable. So how concerned are you about reports of an increase in cybercrime because of the pandemic or because of not paying attention, and what can people do to make sure they don't fall victim to some of these scams?
I think it's a really important question. What has happened is anybody who works from home normally, particularly in a big company, will know that they have all sorts of IT policies and security products, and maybe they have a device from the company which they can use at home. And that's carefully planned. And what's happened in this pandemic is that a whole load of companies that have never done home working or haven't done it at much scale have suddenly sent everybody home. And the priority is business continuity, keep this thing going and get people working. And security is quite inevitably taken a back seat. The problem with that is you've got people using home devices, home computers, and not really knowing what the security threats are and how to avoid them. So what you've had is a compression of a process that would normally take a company months, sometimes years, to do into a couple of weeks. Criminals have spotted that. So cyber criminals are incredibly innovative, and they've spotted two things. One is that there are some real vulnerabilities there, so they can get into a company through people at home who are weakly defended, perhaps don't have any protection on their own computer. The other thing is they can capitalize on fear. So we have seen a spike in fraud dressed up as COVID communications. So things like those spear phishing emails you get that look like they're from a charity to do with COVID, or public health authority to do with COVID, or business help. So they direct you maybe to a website which says, here's the government help on COVID, please put in your credentials and we'll send you a grant. And they look very convincing. These are not easy fakes. So they look like government websites or bank websites. And they harvest people's credentials. Once they've got your credentials, they can start to defraud you. And so we have seen an uptick of that in a big way. The government view is, the National Cybersecurity Centre, is that the overall volume of cybercrime hasn't really changed. It's just more directed now at COVID-related fears and home working vulnerabilities. Everything from the way you're connected to your company, your own computer, and the way you do video conferencing, for example. There's been a lot of publicity about the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses in some video conferencing. So criminals are doing what they've always done. They just adapt to the circumstances. And they're also, of course, attacking the health sector.
Great comment from you. I don't know what kind of time frame you want to give it, 5 years or 10 years, or maybe even less than that. But what do you want to leave our audience with thinking about when it comes to the issue of leadership within the cyber age? What are your key tips or points, or the one thing people should be thinking about right now as we head into 2020?
Well, I think I will go back to communication, because that also covers the digital world. Most of that communication these days is by digital means. So we're going to have to worry about securing that. But I go back to your point, Emma, actually, that I think there are lots of opportunities here. And once we get through the horrors of this pandemic, there will be things that we've done more quickly than we ever thought we could. And we should see that as a springboard for the future. And to zoom back out to where we started on the international picture, I really hope this leads in time to greater international cooperation and a better sense of unity about where we're going, because pandemic really illustrates that individual country approaches are fine up to a point, but they're never going to actually solve the pandemic crisis. You need international cooperation. You need the manufacturability of different countries that you might find difficult to do business with, that are ideologically different. So we're going to have to work it out. And of course, we've got the looming problem of climate change, which certainly my kids are much more worried about than anything else. And their generation is going to have to think about how do we tackle that global problem together, because you can't do it individually. So I hope that's where we'll head.